Let's be honest, there's no escaping it. True crime is everywhere, it's all over our podcasts, it's dominating our streaming services, it's a full-blown cultural phenomenon. But while we're all binging these stories of real-life tragedy, there's a pretty big question we need to ask ourselves. When does this fascination cross a line? That's what we're going to dig into. The fuzzy, often uncomfortable boundary between curiosity and the commodification of suffering. So let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever gotten to the end of a true crime series and just felt kind of gross? Or maybe you're left with this weird humming anxiety that you can't quite shake. If that sounds even a little bit familiar, you are definitely not alone. And we really need to talk about why that feeling is becoming so common. Okay, first things first, let's talk about what this is doing to us on a personal level, because this goes way beyond just feeling a little spooked after an episode. We're talking about something you could call a true crime overdose. It's that point where you're so saturated with this stuff that your fascination starts to feel, well, genuinely harmful.
Just take a look at this list. Do any of these ring a bell? Maybe it's that new hypervigilance, where you're triple checking the locks on your doors at night. Or maybe it's a slow creeping cynicism where you start to distrust people a little more. You might even get what's called empathy fatigue, where these horrific stories start to feel less like human tragedies and more like just another plot line. These are all classic signs that you're mentally and emotionally overloaded.
Now, here's the thing. This isn't some kind of personal weakness. It's literally just biology. When your brain is constantly flooded with stories of intense trauma, your nervous system can actually start to get confused. It begins reacting as if these threats are happening to you. It's called secondary or vicarious trauma, and it's a totally natural response to a pretty unnatural amount of exposure to horror. So, we've talked about the symptoms, but here's a thought. What if that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, what if it isn't just about you watching too much? What if it's a completely rational, completely normal reaction to the actual product we're all consuming? This quote it hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? We think we're just armchair detectives trying to solve a puzzle, but what's really happening is that we're feeding a massive commodification machine, a whole industry designed to package, polish, and sell human pain.
So let's pull back the curtain and take a hard look at that machine. This brings us to part 2, the sickness of the spectacle. We're shifting our focus now from how we feel to a critique of the system that churns all this content out.
And when you break it down, the engine that runs this whole thing is incredibly simple and honestly kind of chilling. Step 1, a real person, a real family goes through the absolute worst experience of their lives. Step 2, that raw trauma gets edited, scored with dramatic music, and cut into bingeable episodes with cliffhangers. Step 3, it gets monetized. And step 4, we're all encouraged to consume it. It's a business model built on a foundation of someone else's suffering. So remember that queasy feeling we talked about at the beginning? Well, it might not just be anxiety. It could be something deeper, something called moral disgust. You know that feeling. It's that physical gut-level reaction you have when you see something that just feels fundamentally, ethically wrong. It's not just your nerves, it's your conscience having a full-blown crisis.
And this is so important. Feeling that disgust isn't a sign that you're weak. It's a sign that you're strong. It's a healthy, powerful signal from your brain telling you, hey, wait a minute, this should not be normal. It's your mind refusing to let real tragedy become just another piece of entertainment.
So if we follow that feeling of disgust, where does it take us? Well, it pushes us to ask some much bigger questions. It kind of forces us to perform an autopsy, not on a person, but on our culture itself. What does the sheer, bizarre, grotesque nature of so many of these crimes actually say about the world that produces them? This quote is such a powerful way to think about it. So many of these crimes aren't just violent, they're weird, grotesque, almost like a dark, twisted joke. And that's not an accident. That feeling of the grotesque, it's a sign of a kind of systemic collapse, where things in society aren't just broken, they're bent into these horrible, unrecognizable shapes. I mean, just look at these examples. We're not talking about criminal masterminds with some evil, elaborate plan. These are stories of catastrophic failures in judgment, in impulse control, in basic humanity. This isn't just evil. It's a kind of meaningless, absurd violence that points to a much deeper breakdown in our social fabric. And maybe the most disturbing sign of this breakdown, it's when the family unit, the one place that's supposed to be our ultimate safe space, completely implodes.
When stories of parents killing their own children become so common that they're a recurring theme in our entertainment, it means that last refuge of safety has become a chamber of horror.
All right, so that's all pretty heavy. The question is, where do we go from here? That feeling of disgust, it doesn't have to be a dead end. In fact, it can be a starting point. It can be a catalyst for something better. This last part is all about how to turn that feeling into a tool and how to shift from being a passive consumer to an active, critical observer.
It really starts by changing your mindset from consumer to critic. Before you hit play on the next big thing, just pause and ask yourself a simple question. Who's actually benefiting from this story being told? Let that feeling of disgust be your compass. Use it to guide you towards stories that actually teach you something about the real world, like problems in our justice system. And maybe most importantly, listen to your body. If you start to feel sick or dizzy or just off, that's a physical stop sign, and you should probably honor it. So if there is one thing you remember from all of this, let it be this. If you feel overwhelmed or sickened or just plain disgusted by the true crime boom, you are not failing to cope. You are experiencing a crisis of conscience. And that's a good thing. It's a sign that your humanity is firing on all cylinders in the face of a really disturbing trend. In the end, the stories we choose to entertain ourselves with, they say a lot about us. They're a mirror for our culture. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What does our collective obsession with true crime really reveal about who we are right now? That's something we're thinking about long after the credits roll.